On October 20th, 2016, Nintendo finally lifted the curtain on its highly anticipated new console with a 3.5-minute video that gave us our first look at the Nintendo Switch. That same day, Nintendo tweeted out this infographic boasting a mere sampling of the third-party companies it had partnered with for its new portable console. A few weeks after the Switch launched, I thought it would be fun to see what had come of these partnerships, so late last March, I produced a video called Third-Party Games on Nintendo Switch, an in-depth look, which cataloged the games that had been released or announced by the companies on that infographic up to that point. Here's a handy-dandy little chart I made to illustrate my findings. Okay, a few quick notes. First, the 8 companies highlighted in red had yet to release or announce a single game. You may notice that 3 of the companies have a total of 0 games but aren't highlighted in red. That's because the games they were responsible for were already counted under another company. For example, Game Trust published 1 game for the Switch, Has Been Heroes, but I had already counted it under Frozen Byte, who developed the title. You may also notice that 13 companies from the infographic aren't represented on this chart. That's because they are predominantly providers of middleware, not game developers or producers. Epic and DNA do make games, but had not released or announced anything for Switch, while Silicon Studio is apparently the developer behind Project Octopath Traveler, but that game was already counted under publisher Square Enix. Now, having said that, while most of the companies in the bottom 2 rows don't actually make video games, they do play an important part in the creation of the games we all know and love. For example, Sumo Digital's Snake Pass, a new multi-platform puzzle game, uses Epic's Unreal Engine 4. Overfence's exclusive Switch title Flip Wars uses Unity's Unity engine. So I don't mean to downplay the contributions of a baker's dozen of these company partnerships. I simply don't have the time to research which Switch games use middleware solutions provided by these 13 companies. Just know that I see you there, bottom 2 rows. And I love you. Okay, with all that out of the way, as you can see, at the time, the other 35 companies had released or announced 50 games. I go over each one in my original video and observed that while there are scores of awesome titles among the 50, well over half were ports of existing games, most years or even decades old. And while it was a bit disappointing that only a fifth of the titles were new or exclusive games, remember that 8 of these companies' announced titles were impossible to categorize at the time. For example, Arc System Works had announced an untitled BlazBlue game but offered no other details. We had no idea if it was new, exclusive, or a port of an existing BlazBlue title. So it's possible that the number of new and exclusive games on this chart could grow as we learn more. In fact, 2 of the games originally categorized as unknown, Grasshopper's Travis Strikes Again No More Heroes and Square Enix's Project Octopath Traveler, have since been confirmed to be Switch exclusives. Which brings us to today. It's been a bit over 7 months since the Switch launched, and in that time we've had E3, Gamescom, PAX, Comic-Con, Tokyo Game Show, and other conventions and trade shows. Plenty of opportunities for these companies to announce what they're bringing to the Switch. So, for the infographics 1-year anniversary, let's take another look and see what games have come from this selection of third-party partners. Hey, well, that's a bit better. 160 total games, with about a quarter of them being new or exclusive, up from a fifth, while the number of old games is still hovering around 2/3 of the total. And the number of companies that have no announced games has dropped by half, so that's nice. Okay, let's dig into the details and see what we've got. 505 Games. Near launch, we knew about 3 games. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, which, so far as we know, will have a simultaneous release on all consoles sometime in 2018. Portal Knights, a port of a 2016 early access game that hit PS4 and Xbox One in May and still hasn't released on Switch. And Terraria, a game that's released on everything over the past 6 years, including the Wii U, and will hit Switch sometime this year? Maybe? Since then, 505 has added Indivisible to the list, an action RPG that should hit everything next year. So, 2 new multi-platform games and 2 ports of older titles. Not a bad mix. Activision. At launch, Activision graced the Switch with Skylanders Imaginators, which came out on everything else the prior October. Since then, Activision hasn't announced a thing for the Switch. Arc System Works. Near launch, Arc System Works had announced 3 games for the Switch. An Untitled BlazBlue game, which is still an Untitled BlazBlue game we know nothing about, New Frontier Days Founding Pioneers, an enhanced port of a 2015 3DS game, and Othello, one of the Switch's few actual exclusives. Since then, we've learned about Sheffy, a port of a 2016 mobile game, Boost Beast, a port of the 2015 mobile game, Double Dragon 4, which came out in January but didn't hit Switch until last month, and Kunio-kun, the World Classics, a collection of a bunch of Kunio games that hits multiple platforms in Japan next year. By the way, Kunio-kun may be a compilation of 15 different games, but it's being sold as one, so I'm only counting it as one. I will be doing the same for other compilations such as Azure Striker Gunvolt Striker Pack, and games that were originally released and sold as separate episodes like Minecraft Story Mode. And for what it's worth, Arc published the physical version of Wonder Boy: The Dragon's Trap in Asia. Doesn't affect me, but I'm sure Asian gamers appreciate it, so I'll add it to the list. And while it's a remake of a 1989 game, I feel it's different enough to count as a new title. So, 8 games in total. Most are ports of old games, but Othello is an exclusive. I mean, yeah, it's Othello, but hey, exclusive. And who knows, maybe the BlazBlue game will be exclusive too. Or at least a new entry in the series rather than a port of an older title. We shall see. Atlas. The only thing we knew about from Atlas back when the Switch launched was an untitled Shin Megami Tensei game. Over half a year later, and we still don't know anything about it, and Atlas hasn't released or announced anything else. Bandai Namco. 7 months ago, Bandai Namco announced 3 games, an untitled Taiko Drum Master game, an untitled Tales game, and a port of the year-old Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, which hit the Switch last month. While we haven't learned anything new about Taiko Drum Master or the Tales game, we have been able to add a few more titles to Bamco's Switch output, including Namco Museum, a collection of old Namco games such as Pac-Man, Galaga, and Dig Dug, Pokken Tournament DX, an enhanced port of the 2016 Wii U title, an enhanced port of the 3-year-old One Piece Unlimited World Red, and a port of 2014's Gotochi Tetsudo, a board game with trains. Additionally, Bandai Namco is handling the distribution of a new multi-platform Ben 10 game in Europe next year. It's also thanked in the credits of ARMS and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but I have no idea what it actually did, so I'm not counting them. So, 8 games, 1 new game, 2 unknowns, and the rest are ports of old games. If you want to count ARMS and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, then add an exclusive and a port. Bethesda. Last March, all we knew about was a port of the 6-year-old Skyrim. Now we know about 2 additional titles, a port of 2016's Doom and a port of this month's Wolfenstein 2, which unfortunately won't hit the Switch until sometime next year. Capcom. Capcom had only 1 title to boast of when the Switch launched, Ultra Street Fighter II, The Final Challengers, an enhanced port of the decades-old Street Fighter II. Some count it as an exclusive. I do not. Since then, 3 titles have been added to Capcom's slate. A port of last year's Monster Hunter Generations, a port of 2012's Resident Evil Revelations, and a port of 2015's Resident Evil Revelations 2. Codemasters. Last March, Codemasters had not yet released or announced a single title for the Switch. It still hasn't. Electronic Arts. We've long known that the Switch would be getting a stripped-down version of FIFA 18, but since the Switch's launch, we've learned Nintendo's new machine will also be getting a port of Fee, an adventure game hitting multiple platforms next year. And I'm assuming it's pronounced Fee and not Feh. So, only 2 games, which is pretty anemic for a company like EA, but hey, at least both titles are new. From Software. Is Switch getting a Souls game? Asked many a gamer when they heard Nintendo had partnered with From Software. Unfortunately, we still don't know, because a year later, From Software still hasn't released or announced anything. Frozen Byte. Near the Switch's launch, we saw the Frozen Byte developed multi-platform title Has-Been Heroes. Since then, it has announced a new multi-platform title, Nine Parchments. So, 2 new titles. Neither are exclusives, but neither are ports of old games either. Nice job, Frozen Byte. Game Trust. Game Trust is the publisher of Frozen Byte's Has-Been Heroes. Nothing else has been released or announced. Grasshopper. Back when the Switch launched, we knew we were getting a game with Travis Touchdown. We have since learned the game is called Travis Strikes Again! No More Heroes. And it's exclusive. Woohoo! That's 2! We're also getting Cinemore EX, an enhanced port of the 2012 title that hit PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC last August, and the Switch about a month and a half later, for $10 more. Gung Ho. Gung Ho had nothing released or announced near the Switch's launch, but it has since confirmed it's working on an action game. And that's all we know. Hamster. A few weeks after the Switch's launch, the various third parties on this infographic had released or announced 50 games between them. Nearly a fifth of them were Hamster's Arcade Archive titles, ports of old Neo Geo arcade games. In addition to the 8 titles it had 7 months ago, it had added or announced 31 additional titles to its Neo Geo lineup and 10 ports of Nintendo arcade classics like Mario Bros., Balloon Fight, and Punch-Out! Should I go through the entire list? In addition to the King of Fighters 98, Waku Waku 7, Shock Troopers, World Heroes Perfect, Metal Slug 3, Nam 1975, the King of Fighters 94, and Neo Turf Masters, Hamster has since released or announced Metal Slug Alpha Mission 2, Samurai Showdown 4, Fatal Fury, Overtop, Blazing Star, Mark of the Wolves, Galaxy Fight Universal Warriors, The King of Fighters 99, Last Resort, Shock Troopers Second Squad, Sengoku, Fatal Fury 2, Magic Drop 2, Fatal Fury Special, Samurai Showdown, Super Sidekicks, Aero Fighters 2, The King of Fighters 2000, Metal Slug 2, Blues Journey, Magician Lord, Spin Master, Zedblade, Art of Fighting, Puzzle, Burning Fight, Metal Slug X, The King of Fighters 95, Robo Army, and Mutation Nation. And for the Nintendo arcade classics, Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros., Balloon Fight, Ice Climber, Pinball, Clu Clu Land, Punch-Out, Excitebike, Urban Champion, and Wrecking Crew. That's 49 total games. Now Hamster's contributions make up nearly a third of all these third-party partner titles. Inti Creates. Back in March, we knew of 2 games Inti Creates was involved with. New multi-platform game Blaster Master Zero, and new multi-platform title Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, which 505 Games is publishing. We've since learned that Inti Creates isn't actually working on Bloodstained, but rather a prequel minigame that will release alongside it. We've also learned of 4 additional titles. Azure Striker Gunvolt Striker Pack, a compilation of previously released 3DS games, Azure Striker Gunvolt 1 and 2, Mighty Gunvolt Burst, a multi-platform game that actually came out on the Switch first, granted by only 2 weeks, but still, Dragon, Marked for Death, an honest-to-goodness Switch exclusive, and Galgun 2, which hits Switch and PS4 someday. As a side note, Inti Creates also did some art for Shantae Half-Genie Hero, which I'm not adding here because I'll be adding it under another company later. Even so, that's 6 games, 4 of which are new, and 1 of which is an exclusive. So, go Inti Creates. Rock on with your bad self. Koei Tecmo. Last March, we knew of 3 games from this company, a port of the year-old Romance of the Three Kingdoms 13, a port of the 3-year-old Nobunaga's Ambition Sphere of Influence, and the upcoming multi-platform title Fire Emblem Warriors. Since then, Koei Tecmo's been a busy little beaver. In the past 7 months, we've learned about a whopping 10 additional titles. Multi-platform RPG Knights of Azure 2, Bride of the New Moon, another multi-platform RPG Atelier Liddy and Sir Alchemists of the Mysterious Painting, multi-platform strategy game Nobunaga's Ambition Taishi, multi-platform action game Attack on Titan 2, a compilation of Dragon Quest Heroes 1 and 2 called Dragon Quest Heroes 1 and 2, Champion Jockey Special, which I'm honestly not sure if it's an updated port of a 2011 game or a new exclusive title for the Switch, so for now I'm marking it down as unknown. A port of the 6-month-old Winning Post-H 2017, a port of the year-old Samurai Warriors Spirit of Sanada, a port of the 3-year-old Dynasty Warriors 8 Empires, and a port of the 4-year-old Warriors Orochi 3 Ultimate. So, 13 games in total, 5 are new, and 1 might even be an exclusive. A little heavy on the ports, but still not too shabby. Konami. Konami was there at launch with the Switch-exclusive Super Bomberman R. Since then, it has updated Super Bomberman R a couple times, so that's nice. Other than that, nada. Level 5. Back in March, Level 5 had yet to release or announce anything for the Switch. 7 months later, it has yet to release or announce anything for the Switch. Marvelous. Last March, all we knew about Marvelous was that it would be bringing a Story of Seasons game to the Switch. That's all we knew at the time, and that's all we know now. But we have learned about other games over the past several months. We're getting 2 exclusive Senran Kagura games. Peach Ball, which is a pinball game, and Shinobi Raffle, which is a massage simulator. Whatever the hell it is exclusive, so yay! We also get a port of 6-month-old Fate Extella the Umbral Star, and hey, remember I said Inti Creates did art for 2016's Shantae Half-Genie Hero? Well, Marvelous owns Xseed, and Xseed published the retail version of Shantae Half-Genie Hero, so on the list it goes! All in all, 5 games, 2 of which are exclusive, and hey, that Untitled Story of Seasons game might end up being exclusive as well. Maximum. Last March, we knew the Switch would be getting a late port of Troll and I. It showed up on the PC, PS4, and Xbox One a few weeks after the Switch launched, and it hit the Switch 5 months later on August 15. And that's all that's been released or announced for Maximum Games. Nipponichi Software. 7 months ago, Nipponichi Software brought a port of the 2-year-old Disgaea 5 to the Switch with all its DLC included. That was all it had for Nintendo fans at the time. In the months since, it has announced the multi-platform bullet hell game Toho Kobotu 5 Burst Battle, the multi-platform RPG brawler Penny Punching Princess, a port of last spring's The Sexy Brutal, which is supposed to be out by the end of the year, and a port of last summer's The Longest 5 Minutes, which is scheduled for sometime next year. Parity Bit. Last March, we knew Parity Bit would be bringing an untitled Derby Stallion game to the Switch. We still know nothing about it, and Parity Bit hasn't released or announced anything else. So, if you're keeping track, of the 8 unknown titles on the original list, 2 turned out to be exclusive, and the other 6 we still haven't learned anything about over the past several months' worth of video game trade shows and conventions. But hey, video game development can take a long time. I'm sure Arc System Works, Atlas, Bandai Namco, Marvelous, and Parity Bit will spill the beans when they're damn good and ready. Platinum. As excited as fanboys like me were to see Platinum games on the list, 3 weeks after launch, the company still had not released or announced anything for the Switch. But that was 7 months ago. Platinum has since told Japanese gaming magazine Famitsu that it is underway with an interesting game. And that's all we know at this point. Sega. Round about the Switch's launch, we were aware of an untitled Shin Megami Tensei game, which I already counted under Atlas, the multi-platform Sonic Mania, the multi-platform Sonic Forces, and a port of 2014's Puyo Puyo Tetris. Since then, we've learned about a port of the 5-year-old Phantasy Star Online 2. Also, Steins Gate Elite, an updated port of a 2009 visual novel, will be hitting the Switch and other platforms next year. Now, 5PB is apparently on publishing and developing duties, but Sega hosted the game at its booth at last month's Tokyo Game Show, so it seems to have something to do with the title. Co-publishing one version, distributing in a certain territory. I haven't been able to suss that out yet, but what the heck? Let's count it. Spike Chunsoft. 7 months since launch, and Spike Chunsoft has still not released or announced anything for the Switch. Square Enix. Back in March, Square Enix had 7 games. Dragon Quest Heroes 1 and 2, which this time I counted under Koei Tecmo. A port of 2012's Dragon Quest X, a port of last summer's Dragon Quest XI, which still doesn't have a release date for the Switch. A port of the year-old I Am Setsuna, Spelunker Party, an updated port of a 2015 game. Second and Setsu Collection, a collection of 3 20-plus-year-old RPGs. And exclusive RPG, Project Octopath Traveler, which was originally reported to be developed by Silicon Studios, one of the predominantly middleware-providing companies on the bottom of the infographic. But oddly, the company's logo doesn't show up in the recently released demo. Instead, the demo boasts gung-ho subsidiary Acquire. Did the project switch hands? Are they both working on it? Whatever's going on, I'm counting it under publisher Square Enix. So there. Anyway, since March, Square Enix has added an additional 8 games to its lineup: upcoming multi-platform RPG Relegend, multi-platform RPG Lost Sphere, a port of 2016's Dragon Quest Builders, its multi-platform sequel Dragon Quest Builders 2, a multi-platform remake of 2000's Fear Effect, a new multi-platform Fear Effect, subtitled Sedna, a port of last May's MXGP3, and, announced right as I was finalizing the script for this video, the upcoming multi-platform game Monster Energy Supercross, which hits the Switch shortly after it hits PC, PS4, Xbox One on February 13th. I'm taking it on faith that shortly after isn't several months, so I'm counting this one as a new game. Don't make me regret it, Square Enix. Anyway, 14 titles, 5 of which are new, and 1 of which is an exclusive. Starbreeze. Back in March, Starbreeze had yet to release or announce anything for the Switch. Since then, it has announced a port of 2013's Payday 2, which is supposed to be out before the end of the year, and Geminos Animal Pop Stars, which is premiering exclusively on Switch. I guess that means it's one of those incredibly rare multi-platform titles that's hitting the Switch first. Take-Two. In March, all we knew we were getting out of Take-Two was the multi-platform title NBA 2K18. Since then, we've learned Switch is also getting a port of 2011's LA Noire, and multi-platform wrestler WWE 2K18, albeit a bit after every other platform. I'll take it on faith that it's only trailing by a couple weeks and count it as a new game rather than a late port. Telltale. Back when the Switch launched, we knew we were getting a late port of 2016's Minecraft Story Mode, and that was it. Since then, we have learned Switch will also get a late port of this year's Minecraft Story Mode Season 2! A late port of this year's Guardians of the Galaxy, the Telltale series. And a late port of last year's Batman, the Telltale series. Better late than never. THQ Nordic. Back in March, THQ Nordic had yet to release or announce anything for the Nintendo Switch, and 7 months later, it has added 3 titles to its Switch portfolio: a month's late and $10 more expensive port of Battle Chasers Night War, a 2-month late and $10 more expensive port of the expanded version of 2012's Cinemore, which I already counted under Grasshopper, and a port of 2016's This Is the Police, which hit PS4 and Xbox One a few weeks after the Switch launch, but still has not come out on the Switch. Tokyo RPG Factory. Tokyo RPG Factory has 2 games for the Switch, I Am Setsuna and Lost Sphere, both of which I already counted under its parent company, Square Enix, who is publishing both titles. TT Games. A few weeks after the Switch launched, we knew about a 6-month late port of LEGO Worlds and a port of 2013's LEGO City Undercover. Since then, we've learned the Switch will also be getting the multi-platform titles LEGO Marvel Super Heroes 2 and the LEGO Ninjago movie video game. Ubisoft. Shortly after the Switch launched, Ubisoft's slate included a port of last year's Steep, a port of last year's Just Dance 2017, and an enhanced port of 2013's Rayman Legend. Ubi has added 4 more titles to its lineup, the exclusive Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, which, yeah, we've known about since this time last year, but it wasn't announced until E3. The multi-platform Just Dance 2018, multi-platform Toys to Life game Starlink Battle for Atlas, and Monopoly, which is an exclusive. So, all in all, 7 games, 2 new, 2 exclusives. Warner Brothers. Okay, last one. The 2 games WB had revealed for Switch last March were the same 2 LEGO games TT Games had. Since then, it has added 3 more games, the 2 additional LEGO games TT Games added, and the multi-platform title, Cars 3, Driven to Win. And there you have it! 160 titles.
Stop the presses! While I was editing this video, Nipponichi Software announced a new action RPG for the Switch, PS4, and Vita called Your 4 Knight Princesses Training Story. So, 161 titles
released or announced for the Switch thus far by this sampling of third-party partners. It's a shame the Switch is missing out on a few of these companies' recently released and upcoming multi-platform titles, such as The Evil Within 2, Assassin's Creed Origins, and Call of Duty World War II, and Anthem, and Code Vein, Darksiders 2, Kingdom Hearts 3, Star Wars Battlefront 2, Red Dead Redemption 2, Far Cry 5, Middle-earth, Shadow of War, Prey, Tekken 7, Ace Combat 7, Madden NFL 18, NBA Live 18, Pro Evolution Soccer 2018, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and South Park The Fractured Butthole. Fortnite, Destiny 2, Need for Speed Payback, Dirt 4, F1 2017, Biomutant, Dragon Ball FighterZ, Mass Effect Andromeda, Metal Gear Survive, Nier Automata, Left Alive, A Way Out, Ghost Recon Wildlands, Injustice 2, Skull and Bones, Psychonauts 2, Life is Strange Before the Storm, and the Secret of Mana remake. To name a few from just these companies. But to be fair, the Switch isn't as powerful as its contemporaries, so it couldn't run most of those games without scaling them back a bit. So, while I understand why they're not coming to the Switch, yeah, a shame nonetheless. Still, there's a whole lot of greatness to be found in what these companies are releasing on the Switch. That said, even if all 9 unknowns turn out to be new or exclusive titles, I can't help but be a bit disappointed by the fact that the vast majority are ports of old games. That's my personal feelings, though. I know a lot of you are super stoked for the opportunity to replay some of your favorites on the go. Portability may mean squatzilla to me, but I ain't the only gamer Nintendo needs to cater to, so here's to more new and exclusive games in addition to ports of titles that Nintendo fans would love to play on the go. Rarity is best pony.